The knowledge belongs to its people, and it's forbidden to give this knowledge to somebody who's not of its people, as somebody who's not necessarily a part of the group, who's not initiated into the club or into the degree that the person is at faith-wise, right? Yeah. It is not right to take the bread of the children and to feed it to the dogs, right? It means what? It means that there is this knowledge that I have, there are these words of God that I have, there are these miracles, there's these divine experiences, and it is meant for children, and it's not meant for people who their mindset or their spiritual degree that they're at is the same or similar to that of a dog. It's not just a matter of obtaining additional knowledge by rising in rank, but actually if you remain in the rank of the masses, you might be led astray. You might be intentionally led astray, and intentionally led astray by the messenger himself. Wow. Yeah. Isn't that something?
That's something.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم والمهدينا وسلم تسليما السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. My dear brother and companion Arno.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته, Father.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
God bless you.
God bless you.
So today we're going to talk a little bit more about the topic which we initiated in the last episode, and it has to do with mystery schools existing within religion, or this idea that there are degrees that a person can go into. There's doors, there's stations, there's rooms in the Father's house, perhaps, that a person can enter into if he wants, whereby he will or she will attain more knowledge, deeper insight, secrets, perhaps, divine secrets, and education into the mysteries of the religion that the masses are not privy to. I think this concept is an interesting one. You know, and it kind of contradicts a little bit how the majority of the people on the planet believe or think that religion operates and how the Prophet operates. You have, for example, in mainstream Islam, Sunni Islam, so to speak, this idea that religion is the religion of Islam consists only of the idea that the Prophet came to the nation. He had with him a message. He brought with him a book. You know, he has with him a series of laws. We have these duties, these obligations to say the Shahada, to pray 5 times a day, to give the zakat, right, once a year at least, to fast the month of Ramadan, and to make pilgrimage once in our lifetime. And if we keep these commandments, you know, then that's all there is to being a Muslim, you know, and we should be grateful, we should be thankful. You know, it's a very simple process. That's what the Prophet wanted us to do. That's what he came for. The Prophet's just. Everybody has access to all things that the Prophet came with. He wouldn't give anything special to anybody else. And, you know, it is impossible for us to kind of anyway be able to tell what is authentic and what's not authentic. So we have hadiths, which we consider, or narrations or sayings, which we consider to be valid or truthful. And the way that we consider these narrations to be truthful is based on how many narrators have narrated the same saying. So from the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, if we have 10 people that were reliable, that are saying that the Prophet said a particular saying, then he said that saying. Okay? But we disregard all of the ahad hadiths, the hadiths or the narrations that we only get through one narrator, for example. We disregard those. We don't want those. And so by this logic and by this process, the mainstream religion of Islam eliminates all narrations and traditions, deems them as weak, rejects them, does not rely upon them. All of those narrations that would have been passed on from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to one of his disciples or a close companion of his, right, in secret or in private. These types of conversations, because they're private and they're only coming from one source, we disregard them, right? And so that eliminates the possibility that the Prophet had knowledge that he handed down to humanity outside of the mainstream knowledge, which is accessible and in the hands of everybody. And you see this same theme repeating itself in the time of Jesus and the disciples, right? And really during the establishment of the church, all of the people came together in Rome, and they began to decide that Christianity is going to be the official religion of the Roman Empire. And they had a series of meetings, some of which they decided amongst one another what books they were going to place inside of the Bible. Now, the Christians at that time, they had a lot of texts, of sources, of writings, of narrations. They were rich in many traditions surrounding Jesus Christ. Okay? You had gospels that were written down that belonged to the different disciples. You had gospels which spoke about the infancy, the childhood of Jesus Christ and the miracles which he performed, etc. You had gospels to disciples such as Barnabas that you hear really little about in the New Testament that we have today. You have the gospel of Mary Magdalene. You have the gospel of Judas Iscariot, right? You have all of these sources. You even have the gospel or the book of Nicodemus and some of the other individuals that are merely mentioned by name. And you also have a lot of writings that give you backdrops and backstories to these disciples. What were they doing before? And some traditions and narrations about them. What were they doing before they actually joined up with Jesus? And most importantly, they have these collections of sayings that Jesus told Thomas or Jesus told Mary in private. Sayings that were written down by these disciples, sayings that even some of the other disciples that were around Jesus couldn't verify its authenticity. They didn't know because Jesus had not spoken this particular knowledge to them. So you'll always have these scenes where in these gospels that were left, or these texts that were left out of the New Testament, where Jesus will draw aside Mary or draw aside Thomas or draw aside James, right? Or John or one of the companions. And he'll begin to share with them things that he says if he shared with the rest of the disciples, basically they would freak out or they would run away, or that there would be fire that would swallow them, etc., right? And the church heads or leaders decide that what they want to do is they want to leave all of this out. They want to cancel it, because it's unreliable. Because it is hadith that is coming from ahad sources, one source, right? Or from, a few sources, and we don't know the legitimacy of these documents, and they decide that they're only going to stick to the narrations that are given to us in the Bible by primarily, 5 individuals, although there is an argument that actually these 4 individuals, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, John, right, who are the writers of the Gospels, are either one individual, or they're drawing off of one source, or maybe, they're made up individuals or fictitious names that were made up by sources that were close to or in cahoots with the apostle, or the so-called apostle, Paul, right? And Paul being the fifth individual. So they stick kind of to the Pauline Christianity and any other teachings of Jesus that would have went against that which is in the New Testament, or would have seemed a little bit alien to it or different to it. They tend to leave out, and they just stick to that. And by doing that, Christianity, right? And the majority of Christians believe that all that is needed and all that they need to read, all that they need to learn can be found within this one book, which is the New Testament. There's no reason to look beyond that. And they limit themselves, just like the Muslims limit themselves to only the Quran and the Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, this group of Sahih Hadiths or verifiable, right, hadiths that were narrated by many people at the same time. They limit themselves only to those traditions that were given to us in the New Testament. And the same thing is true for Judaism. Judaism also went through a similar process whereby there were a lot of extra biblical texts and books that were taken out of most versions of the Old Testament. And an example of that, for example, is the book of Enoch, right? And there are many other books as well, in addition to that were taken out of the Old Testament and not placed within it. And then Jews have stuck to the Torah, which is in between their hands, and that which the rabbis have given them in their writings and in their teachings, whether it's the Midrash or other writings than that. So we find ourselves where Jews, Christians, and Muslims are in a position where they think that all that there was to learn from Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad was given to the masses. And yet we find ourselves in a position where there exists thousands upon thousands of narrations and instances, right, in the holy books as well as in the books of the narrations that indicate otherwise, right? You have in the Torah an incident where Moses was going to meet the Lord, right? And in this incident where Moses goes to meet the Lord, he's instructed to take with him a particular number of companions, all right, to go meet God on the mount, because they had wanted to see God. And so here you have an instance where God opens up the door for a select elite group. And the narrations of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, when they're describing this event, they basically state that, Moses and his companions, they wanted to see God. There was a group of companions that were basically essentially wanting to see the God of Moses, to experience him. They wanted to have a higher connection to him. They didn't disbelieve in Moses. They actually believed in Moses, and they just wanted to experience that which Moses was experiencing. And so they requested from Moses to take them. Moses asks permission from God. God grants that permission, and the tradition states that they all go forth with Moses, and when it comes time for God to reveal himself, basically all of them instantaneously die from the shock of the presence of God, on the mountain as he manifests himself, and they all die. And the first of them to come back to life, because they're resurrected again, is Moses. hence why in the Quran he says that he is, the first of the believers after he states that he repents for this request that he asked for. And then the narration from Muhammad and the family of Muhammad says, and all of those 70 odd number, or 72, 73 members that had gone with Moses on the mountain, that all of them were prophets. All of them were prophets or became prophets due to this experience that they have. So we find in Judaism this theme that there are the main group of the Israelites, the main group of believers, the main body of believers, the congregation, but there's also special ones.
Yes.
Who are able to become priests, who are able to pass beyond the veil, and they are able to communicate with God or serve in the temple in certain functions, or they're able to go with Moses and handle certain experiences that perhaps the rest of the congregation did not. You have also these particular duties, functions, stations. Moses appoints priests. He also appoints judges amongst the Israelites. And so these are positions that certain people are privy to that others are not privy to, right?
Yes.
In Christianity, you have instances in the New Testament where Jesus takes some of the disciples and shows them from the mysteries that which he cannot show the rest of them. And one of these instances is when he takes James, John, and Peter, and he ends up revealing himself in the scene of the Transfiguration. His body becomes like light and white and shining, and all of a sudden there is Moses and Elijah that appear on the left and the right of Jesus Christ. And so this instance that took place, it was a special one, and there were only particular people that were privy to it, and those were some of the elected disciples of Jesus Christ. You find in Islam, in the narrations of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, this recurring theme that takes place, whereby the Imams from the Ahl Bayt alayhim salam actually state very clearly that there is this command from God to speak to the people in accordance to their level of faith, in accordance to their mind. And that's why the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in one narration, he commands the Shia, the followers of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, the believers, to speak to the people in accordance to their mind. And when you take this, you find the same saying being said by Jesus when he states in another one of the Gospels, he states that it is not right to take the bread of the children and to feed it to the dogs. Right? It means what? It means that there is this knowledge that I have. There are these words of God that I have. There are these miracles. There's these divine experiences. And it is meant for children, and it's not meant for people who their mindset or their spiritual degree that they're at is the same or similar to that of a dog, right? And he also states in another narration that it's not correct to place necklaces, right, of pearls around the necks of swine. So essentially what Jesus is saying in these same narrations is the same thing that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying, although perhaps in a more direct way, that the knowledge belongs to its people, and it's forbidden to give this knowledge to somebody who's not of its people, as somebody who's not necessarily a part of the group, who's not initiated into the club or into the degree that the person is at faith-wise, right? Yeah. In another narration from the Ahl Bayt alayhim salam, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi and Imam Ali alayhi salam and other members of the Ahlul Bayt, they say that very clearly that Abu Dharr was in the 9th degree. So now we know that there are degrees, and we know that there's a 9th degree. And he says that Miqdad was in the 8th degree, and Salman was from us, the Ahlul Bayt, and he was in the 10th degree. And so now we know that there's a 10th degree. And a person who reaches that 10th degree becomes what? Becomes a member of the Ahlul Bayt. So now there is this degree that a person can attain even though he's not born into the household of the Prophet Muhammad, but through their faith, they can become a member of the household of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi, just like Salman, but it's at this 10th degree, and it's possible to get there because Salman got there. Yeah, and that's something that is very important to note. Then the narration continues and it states, and if Abu Dharr, who was at the 8th degree, knew what was in the heart of Salman, he would have killed him. And so now we realize that the difference in the consciousness, in the knowing of God and His Messenger, and the difference in knowledge between one degree and another is so vast that one person could look at another person in a higher degree and consider him to be a heretic, a lunatic, somebody who's a criminal, somebody who deserves to die. Right? That's the difference between the two. And this is further verified by another narration in which the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam says that the person who's at the 9th degree will look back at the person who's on the 8th degree, or look back at himself when he was in the 8th degree and say, you know, my companion or I, when I was there, it was upon nothing. I was not upon anything of religion. So each time a person enters into a new degree or a new level of faith out of these 10 stations or ranks or levels, it feels like you were never a member of the faith before that. You didn't know anything of religion before that. Your experience with God, your experience in the religion, your understanding and grasping of it, it becomes as if you had just woken up from a deep slumber, right? And previously, before that, you knew nothing. And this particular tradition or narration should push an individual, you know, to have this kind of fire and sense of urgency within him to actually reach and elevate and rise in the ranks and in the degrees as fast as possible, right? Or else they would fear that one would fear that he would die and exit out of this world and go to the hereafter, having thought that he was upon the correct religion that everybody else was upon, but he comes to realize in the end that he was just a member of the masses, a member that really truly didn't know anything, and that there were other believers that were at the 2nd degree that, you know, in his eyes, for him, like they're upon the religion and he's upon nothing, let alone somebody who's in the 3rd degree or the 4th degree or the 5th degree or 6th. This narration also clearly clarifies to us that there is this journey. There's a mystery school that's existing within Islam and also had existed in Judaism and Christianity. There's a system, a hierarchy, a path that the believer was meant to walk on, that maybe the believer does not even know, or most of the believers don't even know that it exists, unless a person draws himself closer to the Prophet or the Messenger. And these ranks are attainable. And in it, you can hear things that the masses don't hear. It's really scary, aren't it? it's really scary because another group of narrations state and kind of make the case that it's not just a matter of obtaining additional knowledge by rising in rank, but actually if you remain in the rank of the masses, you might be led astray. You might be intentionally led astray, and intentionally led astray by the messenger himself.
Wow.
Yeah. Isn't that something?
That's something.
Yeah, so this group of narrations now, it kind of switches the table on the school of thought that the people have, which is that the messenger came, he gave us all that we needed, and khalas. And that the narrations that are most reliable are the narrations that the masses have heard and have narrated. So if a narration has many narrators, that's the more reliable one. This group of hadiths here from the family of the Prophet, it's saying the opposite. It's saying actually be careful of those hadiths that the most of the people narrated, because it's very likely that some of those, if not most of those, are actually false. A great number of those narrations might have been placed there to kind of sift through the believers and push away enemies, people that are there for alternative reasons or alternative purposes.
Excuse me to interrupt, but there is I see two things. It will be a religion that is made by usurpers, and that create a religion by the majority of the hadiths, and create this religion that is not really the real religion, but it is because they are not appointed by God to define what is religion. It's not the true religion, and they are somehow misleading the people. But now you are saying that the prophet or the messenger himself will say things to the masses also in order to mislead them?
Absolutely, yeah. So why mislead them? And that's quite a big statement.
Yes.
And I'll give you some examples of some of the narrations. So there was instances where in the traditions you'll have scenes where Imam Al-Sadiq or Imam Al-Baqir, one of the Imams, is sitting with his companions. And the companion will narrate that then a man will enter in upon Imam Al-Sadiq alayhi salam, and he'll ask him a question.
Yes.
And the Imam will answer him. He's asking about a verse in the Quran, for example. And the Imam would answer him and give him the meaning of the verse in the Quran. Then the man would leave. And then the companion says, and then I would see a second person, and he would enter in upon the Imam Al-Sadiq in the same majlis. That guy just walked out, and here's a new guy, he comes in. And he asks the Imam the exact same question that the Imam was asked by the first guy. And yet he gives a totally different answer. And so this left the companion that was there with Imam Al-Sadiq alayhi salam feeling uncomfortable. He was confused. His stomach was turning. He thought to himself, if it wasn't for the fact that I had absolute faith in the Imam, I would have disbelieved in this religion, because I'm seeing with my own eyes the Imam giving contradicting answers to two different people within the same hour. And he ends up mustering up the courage to question Imam Al-Sadiq alayhi salam about it. And then the Imam alayhi salam reveals to him basically that he's speaking to the people in accordance to their mindset. He's speaking to the people in accordance to how much they can handle. He clarifies to him that for every verse in the Holy Quran, there are 70 at least, and that's the minimum, 70 different faces by which the Imam can interpret the same verse. Okay? So, for example, one verse that mentions in it, right, the wine, right, or gambling, or al-fahsha wal-munkar, right, that the evil deeds, or this or that in one face, these words are referring to, for example, wine and gambling. Mm-hmm. But another interpretation of it is that it's talking about Abu Bakr and Umar, for example, or it's talking about this tyrant or that tyrant. Or there's verses of the Quran which mention by name Pharaoh or Nimrod or Haman or some of the villains that are against Moses or Abraham. And one interpretation of it is that it's speaking about Pharaoh, the Pharaoh that was against Moses. But another interpretation is that it's talking about one of the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, right?
Yes.
Like Muawiyah or Yazid or Abu Bakr or Umar or one of these guys. And so there's 70 different ways that the Imam can interpret a hadith. And he says, and for every interpretation that we give, there's a way out that we have. You know, like there's no way that a person can hold against the Imam a proof. He can't say against the Imam, you gave us this interpretation and now you're saying this and therefore you're lying. The Imam has the ability and has the knowledge to show that any apparent contradiction in the interpretations of the verses actually is not contradicting at all, and that all of them are correct, right? But he might say a thing in order to allow somebody to believe a thing, and that brings us to another set of narrations whereby the Imam will say something in response to somebody, right? But he means by it something else. Okay?
Yes.
So, for example, there might be a companion who will walk in, or somebody and sit with the Imam, and then somebody from the general population of Muslims would walk in, and he would ask the Imam, what do you say about Abu Bakr as-Siddiq? Abu Bakr the sincere, right? Abu Bakr the close one. And the Imam would, in the apparent, praise Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and say he was a very sincere individual. And then the person would walk out and the companions would say, how did you just praise Abu Bakr when I've heard many of your talks in which you said that Abu Bakr was the great enemy and usurper of the caliphate? And then the Imam would say, I did not lie, O so-and-so. He was indeed sincere in his enmity for Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, right? So he'll use this concept of taqiyya, this concept of concealment of the truth in front of the enemies of the messenger or the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the people that would know the truth of what it is that the Imam was saying, they had to be members of the mystery school of the Imam. They had to be disciples to the Imam. Their degree of faith would not just be somebody who's at the first degree, who's basically just a Muslim, because being a Muslim is the very first of degrees. It's a prerequisite, actually, to be a person who submits to whatever it is that the Imam or the Messenger says. So you have to be even more advanced than that. All right, to have heard and understood and gotten the real essence of what it was that the Imam was trying to say. Imam Ahmad al-Hassan and the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, when they were interpreting particular verses that had to do with the olive tree, all right, and the olive oil that is mentioned in the Quran, they state that, knowledge is water, right? So water is knowledge. And when a person even has a dream of water, many a times, depending on the context of the dream, this water is symbolizing knowledge. It's an allegory for that, right? The pure water is pure knowledge. But the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam also said that there exists something else which the true believers drink from. Those people who are from Muhammad and the family of Muhammad drink from. And that's oil, the olive oil. That the olive oil, right, that is mentioned in the Quran is an allegory. One of its interpretations is it's an allegory for that thick, heavy knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that can only be drunk by people that it's easy to drink water. It's not so easy to drink olive oil, right? Its taste is bad. It's heavy in nature, right? It slides down and goes down the throat, right? A lot heavier than, until it enters into the inside of the human being, a lot heavier than water does, right? So there exists these different types of knowledge. Knowledge which is heavy, and that the people who are privy to hearing this knowledge have to be at the rank of somebody like Salman. And then there's other knowledge, which is general knowledge, which might be available for believers that are at a lesser rank. And this knowledge, which is heavy, which is given to the companions, it must be safeguarded. And there's even a group of narrations that state that the person who tells the secrets of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad is like a person who has usurped from them their rights. A person who goes, hears special knowledge and secrets from the Ahlul Bayt and tells it to the public is like a person who usurped their right, and that this person, the result of their action is that they must be killed. God in the end causes them to be killed. And then the Ahlul Bayt refer to particular companions of theirs that had lived and gotten killed by the enemy due to the fact that they told these secrets. And what's important about that is that now when you begin to puzzle and put together these different narrations, a picture emerges. A picture emerges of a religion that's existing within a religion, an apparent religion that a lot of its information might be false. Yeah. Because the Imams came and the Prophet came during times where there were many enemies, a time where people were worshipping sticks and stones, a time where the Arab Bedouins were a lot more ignorant than they are today, and they can only handle so much. And secrets were given, and these secrets had to be guarded. And so there was a knowledge that existed and ranks that existed outside of the realm of knowing of the majority of the Muslims, right? And this knowledge was not just given to people and that's it, but rather it had to be guarded as well and protected and kept from going out to the masses. And so that presents a challenge, because the believer who's a true believer now, what does he need to do in order to know his God and know his religion? A true believer, a person who submits, Arnold, a person who's just a Muslim is a person who will say, okay, I accept what the Prophet said. I accept that the Prophet came. I believe that he came. Okay, I confess with my tongue that I believe that, Now I just want to live my life. What are the things that I have to do in order to not go to hellfire? What do I have to do? I have to pray. I have to say the Shahada. I have to give money to the charity to the poor and fast the month of Ramadan and pilgrimage. Great. I'm going to do those things. Now I'm safe. Okay. Thank you very much. Not interested in anything else. Yeah. The true believer, though, the difference between him and the others, like, okay, well, now I'm given this tale. I'm told that there is a God that split the sea at the hands of Moses, that sent the Burak to take the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ on the night journey, that split the moon in half, that allowed Jesus to walk on water. And Jesus said, right, that if we had faith the size of a mustard seed, we'd be able to tell that mountain to move from there to there. Right? And it would obey. Well, I'm not satisfied with the bare minimum. I'm not satisfied with just obeying the normal commandments or being saved from going into hellfire. I want to attain a special relationship with Jesus Christ. I want to attain a special relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I want to obtain a special relationship with Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. I want to see and experience these things. I want to be a prophet or a messenger too. I want to get as close as I can to God. Nothing else is important. What else is there in the world that could be more important than this idea that God is here and he wants us to follow him? You know? So the true believer will actively seek to get closer, find the messenger in his time in order that he may rise in degrees, right? Because he knows that he is poor and the teacher is rich. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is rich, right? One of the narrations of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, it states that the Imam is not in need of anybody, while everybody else is in need of him, all right? And so that goes to confirm and show that everybody besides the Hujjah needs the Hujjah. What do they need the Hujjah for? To know God and to be able to be initiated into these mysteries and into the knowledge, to be given a glass of pure olive oil, right? Oil that almost lights itself, oil that can be put inside of a lamp, in the lamp of the heart of the human being, and that can be set on fire in order that we see and eliminate the darknesses that is within oneself. So the person now, and the goal and the mission is to find that teacher and then prove themselves worthy disciples in order to elevate up those degrees. So I think we'll stop there. We've established in this episode that there exists these narrations and this idea that there's a religion behind the religion. There's a true religion that is secret in nature. That is definitely what Simon Peter knew, and the disciples of Jesus Christ was much greater than that which the normal people knew, that which Muhammad and the family of Muhammad knew and spoke about with their close disciples was much different than the religion that the others practiced. That what they practiced in comparison to this is nothing. They're like upon nothing and upon no religion at all in comparison to that. We proved that, and we seek, inshallah, in the future episode to guide the believer who is watching, who decides to undertake this journey, on how it is that he can, after identifying the messenger, how it is that he can begin to embark on this journey in order to accomplish his goal. Thank you so much for joining me today, Arnold, and God bless you.
Thank you so much for